In this project, we are going to be working the Crazy Cool Crochet Asymmetrical Poncho with crocheted buttons. Those buttons are really going to set off this poncho. And yes, we are going to crochet them, and it is easy, really easy. So for this project, I went with Red Heart Super Saver in Ombre. The ombre is what also adds to the interest of this asymmetrical poncho. In addition to the yarn, which by the way is a number 4 medium weight. And yes, absolutely, you can substitute for another number 4 medium weight yarn. That's fine. The hook is a little bit larger than we would normally use. It is a J or a 6mm, and we'll need some scissors. Right, before we get started, I wanted to give you a sneak peek of the stitch that we are using. And I am so sorry, but I don't know the name of the stitch. I learned this from Natty, and I don't believe she used a name for it either. In any case, this is a really pretty unique stitch, and we have a row of single crochets in between these cluster rows. This is a very unique, very pretty stitch. Once you get into the swing of it, this works up really fast. And we will be working this from the short side. Okay, so let's say this is what we're working, and this is the short side of the panel. And we will be working our way all the way up for a very long panel that we will then fold over, and we will sew along or seam along the shoulder a little bit, add the buttons, and of course this will be fitting like this. Okay, so we're working it this way and then folding it over. But let's get started. And I wanted to ask if anybody does know the name of this stitch, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. That would be awesome. Okay, now we will start with a chain in an odd number. So for size small medium, we're going to work a chain of 57, 5-7. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to just use this little swatch again, just to show you how to work the stitches, but you will work a chain of 57 for small medium. For every additional size larger, you can add 10 more chains to the foundation chain, and that will give you an extra 4 inches in the second chain from the hook. So the first one is right there. It always shrinks up. Do not count the one on the hook. So don't count that very first one. In the next chain, a single crochet. Just a regular single crochet and a single crochet in each chain across. So when you are done with your chain, you will have 56 single crochets. At the end of the row, chain 2 and turn. Now skip that very first space under the turning chain into the next space. Insert the hook, pull up the yarn, 2 loops on the hook. Pull the yarn through the first loop. Now, working in the same space, yarn over, insert the hook, pull up the yarn. You will have 4 loops on the hook. Pull the yarn through all 4 and then chain 1. Now, what I probably should have mentioned at the very start, you want to work loosely, quite loosely actually, for 2 different reasons. One is because, again, this yarn is a little bit rougher, even though it will soften up in the wash. Using the looser stitch will help with the drapeability. Is that a word? Will help with the draping of the poncho. Okay, so you don't want tight stitches. The second reason, the stitches themselves, once we go back to do the next single crochet row in a minute, you need these stitches to be loose in order for the hook to be able to go through them comfortably. Now let's keep going. Okay, so we did the chain 1. Now skip the next space. Into the next one, we're going to repeat that. So pull up the loop, pull up the yarn for 2 loops, pull through 1 loop, pull up the yarn in the same exact space. We've got 4 loops on the hook, pull the yarn through all 4, nice and loose, chain 1. Especially that chain needs to be loose. Skip the next space, repeat into the next space. Pull up a loop for 2 loops on the hook, pull the yarn through 1 loop, yarn over into the same space, pull up the yarn, 4 loops on the hook, pull the yarn through all 4, chain 1. Skip the next one into the last space, insert the hook. Be careful that you're going under the 2 strands that make up that last space, that last chain there. And do the same thing. Pull through 1 loop, yarn over, 4 loops on the hook, pull through all 4, chain 1, and turn. Isn't that pretty? Okay, so now the next row is going to be a row of single crochets, and all you're doing is entering a single crochet into each stitch. So you should end up with 56 single crochets. Okay, so go into that first space and watch out for those 2 strand chains at the top. Those are your stitches that you're going to work with. So there's that first one. Single crochet, keep it loose. There's the second one. See how it's already, I was too tight there, and now I'm having trouble getting in there. I didn't listen to myself. Single crochet. Okay, there's the next one. Single crochet. And keep going all the way across. And then the last one is going to go into right there, the turning chain. Now chain 2 and turn. Now we will repeat the row of clusters. So you're going to skip that very first space, into the next space, enter the hook, pull up the yarn, pull through 1 loop, yarn over, pull up for 4 loops on the hook, pull through all 4, chain 1 loosely. Skip the next space, repeat in the next. Chain 1, skip the next, and you'll repeat your cluster into the last space. Pull through 1, yarn over, 4 loops on the hook, pull through all 4, chain 1, and turn. Now repeat your single crochet row. And that's it. Those are your 2 repeat rows. For a panel 52 inches long, you will work for 121 rows, and you will end on a single crochet row. You will be on the front side, on the right side, and you know that because there's the tail from the foundation row, which makes this the right side. Now we are going to continue down the long edge, working a single crochet into approximately each space. So let's go ahead and do that. Turn the panel so the long edge is facing you. So you would have entered your last single crochet along that last row. Turn your panel this way, and then work a single crochet into the same space where you ended. So you actually have 2 single crochets in that last space, and then continue down the edge. This edge will be the one along your neck and shoulders. So this will give you a nice finish. And that's all you do. And do that all the way to the end of the edge. At the end of that, you can go ahead and tie off your yarn. Now we are going to start working on the border, on the long edge. So the panel is right side facing you, and the opposite edge from where we just worked the single crochets along the neck and shoulder. So this is the other long edge. Right side facing, leave a long tail to weave in at the end. So into that very first space, or the little corner space, enter your hook, do a chain 1 to lock it in. Now we will be working into the cluster rows. So there's a cluster row, a single crochet row, cluster row, single crochet row. So now chain 4. That first one counts as 1, 2, 3, 4. Now slip stitch into that first cluster row and chain 3. And skip over to the next cluster row, do a slip stitch in there, chain 3. You will repeat that into each of the cluster row spaces. And do that all the way across until you get to the end. At the end of that row, you do your last chain 3, and now we're going to slip stitch into the second chain in that turning chain. Slip stitch, chain 4, and turn. Now we are simply going to repeat what we just did. So slip stitch into that first chain 3 space, chain 3, slip stitch into the next chain 3 space, chain 3, and continue across the row. Now at the end of row 3, we did our last chain 3, and now we're going to slip stitch into the second chain of the turning chain, chain 4, and turn. Now we're going to enter a double crochet into that first chain space, chain 1, and enter 2 double crochets into the same space, now slip stitch into the next chain space, and 2 double crochets in the next chain space, chain 1, 2 more double crochets in the same space, slip stitch into the next chain space, and repeat that cluster. So 2 double crochets in that next chain space, chain 1, 2 more double crochets in the same space, and repeat that across the row. Now we're at the end of row 4. We entered our last cluster. Now chain 3 and slip stitch into that turning chain. Now this time chain 5 and turn. Now we are going to slip stitch into the first chain 1 space. So the space between the double crochet cluster. slip stitch, chain 4, slip stitch into the next center of the cluster in that chain 1 space, chain 4, and repeat. Now at the end of row 5 we did our last chain 4. We're going to skip the next cluster and slip stitch into the turning chain. Chain 5 and turn. Now we will slip stitch into that first space, chain 5, and then slip stitch into the next space, chain 5, and repeat across the row. At the end of that row we did our last chain 5. We're going to slip stitch into that turning chain, and chain 4, and turn. So double crochet in that first space, chain 1, 2 double crochets in the same space, double crochet in the next space, another double crochet, chain 1, 2 more double crochets in the same space. Repeat the clusters into each space. We've come to the end of that row. We worked into that last, or second to the last space. Now we're going to do 2 double crochets into that very last space, the turning chain space. Chain 1, 1 double crochet in the same space, and then 1 double crochet in the turning chain, and chain 4, and we'll turn. Now slip stitch into that very first chain 1 space, and chain 4, and slip stitch into the next chain 1 space, chain 4, and continue across. We worked into the last cluster, chain 4. Now we're going to skip the next cluster, that last one, and just slip stitch right into the turning chain, chain 5, and turn. Slip stitch into the first space, chain 5, slip stitch into the next space, chain 5, and repeat across the row. At the end of that row, we're going to do our last chain 4. We're going to skip that last big space and just slip stitch right into the turning chain. Now chain 1. Now we're going to turn this to the side a little bit, and we're just going to clean up that raw edge with single crochets. So as you can see, we've already got single crochets over here. So we're just going to do single crochets and meet up to these single crochets. Okay, so enter a single crochet into that first space. Enter a second single crochet into the same space. 2 single crochets into the next space. 2 single crochets into the next space. Let's do 3 in that next space. All we're trying to do is just work our way evenly across. So if 2 looks better on yours, then go ahead with 2. Now 2 in the next space. And now we're going to slip stitch to meet up with these single crochets here. Slip stitch, chain 2, because now we're going to tie off the yarn, cut off the yarn. I do 2 chains here to create a knot, as you will see in a second here. Leave a tail for weaving in. Pull the yarn through. Now squeeze down these chains. And that forms a nice tight knot. You can't even see it. And then you can weave that in to hide it. So we need to do the same on the other side. So there's the other raw edge of the border. So let's attach the yarn. I'm going to have to turn this around because I want to attach it over here. So there's the raw edge that we will be working. There's the single crochets. This is actually the foundation single crochets. So we'll be meeting up with those. Okay, so insert the hook into the corner of the turning chain. Leave a tail. Chain 1 to lock that in. Now 2 single crochets into that first space. 2 single crochets into the next. Just repeat what we did before. And now slip stitch to join. Cut it off. Do the same as we did on the other one. Okay, now it's time for the buttons. Who's excited? I'm excited. Okay, now take the yarn, put it in front of your index finger, your pointer finger, and wind it around your finger, leave a little tail, about 17 times. That's 17. And don't do it too tightly, because you need to have room to maneuver. Now, very carefully slip it off your fingers so that it does not unwind. And we're going to need to work into that center. Slip it off the fingers. There's your center. Grab your hook. Insert the hook. Now grab the yarn. Bring it through that hole. And do a chain to lock that in. We're going to be working single crochets into that hole. It does feel tight. That is correct. So the goal here is to enter as many single crochets as it takes to cover these strands. And it's okay to wind this around the back here and incorporate it into your single crochets. So now that we have filled in that circle, those strands, let's go ahead and slip stitch into the first single crochet. Now we are going to repeat that. We're going to enter single crochets into that central hole again, and this time we're working over this row and into the hole. So go into the hole, grab the yarn, pull it up tall, single crochet, into the hole, nice and tall, single crochet. You'll do that all the way around again. Okay, now I have come back to where I started. Slip stitch to join. Now we're going to do reverse single crochets. If you're a beginner, don't worry, this is fairly simple. It might take a couple tries to get used to it. So we're working single crochets going backwards. Instead of going this way, we're going this way. Okay, so into that first chain, insert the hook, grab the yarn, pull it through, 2 loops on the hook, pull it through for a single crochet. Now into the next chain space, insert the hook, pull the yarn through, 2 loops on the hook, pull the yarn through for a single crochet. Into the next chain space, pull the yarn up, 2 loops on the hook, pull the yarn through both loops, single crochet. See how pretty that's looking? This is going to be the last row. I entered my last reverse single crochet. Now slip stitch into the beginning of that row. Oops. Chain 2, leave a tail. We're going to cut this off. Pull the yarn through, squeeze it down. You're squeezing down those chains for a, whoops, for a knot. Now we'll weave this in to the back, the tail. There's your button. Pretty cool. So make 2 more. We're going to put 3 of them onto the crochet asymmetrical poncho. Now we are going to work on the seam. So this is the neck opening. This is the long edge, the opposite long edge. So down here on the bottom, this is the border edge. So that's the neck edge. So I've used contrasting yarn to mark where I will start the seam and end the seam. And then the bottom here will remain open. So you're going to measure about 10.5 inches with the REIDEA body measure tape. This starts with the 2 inches already marked here. So then this is the edge. So it's about 10.5 inches for the opening. Then add your stitch marker. Then we will seam about 7 inches. Put your stitch marker, and this is where we will start seaming and work our way up this way. And of course this is the wrong side, so be real careful with that. Make sure you're working on the wrong side. And it retracts. I love this little gadget. I'm going to leave a link in the description area below the video, the white space where you open that up. And well, in there you're going to find all of my social media links. You'll find the detail, the link to crazycoolcrochet.com, where you will eventually find the written instructions, and you'll find a link to my Etsy shop down there, and a link to this body measure tape. So take your yarn needle, length of yarn. You want to insert the hook under 2 strands on each panel each side. Pull through. I like to knot it. I like my knots. And just use a regular whip stitch to go through your 2 panels. And just do that until you get to the other stitch marker. Now what I think I'm going to do is switch out this yarn for the lighter shade so that it blends in. Okay, so when you get to the end, you'll just do a couple of more whip stitches coming back this way, leave a tail, cut it off, and weave it through. Now determine the placement for your buttons. So this is along the seamed edge. Now we've got right side facing up, and I want to do my buttons like this. One right at the neck edge, one in the center, and one at the bottom toward the opening. So it's up to you if you'd rather just do 1 button, 2 buttons, whatever you like. And again, we will use the yarn needle and length of yarn. Make sure your yarn is matching. Okay, so all I'm going to do is go from underneath. And because these are so large, and once you have it on, this will be like popping up. So we don't want that to happen. Okay, so go underneath, and we're going to be working around the edge to pin it down more or less. Okay, leave a tail so you can tie that up and weave it through, maybe a little bit longer. So you're grabbing a strand from the main panel and a strand from the button and working your way around. Then bring your yarn through so that it's on the underneath side along with this one, tie them together, weave them through. Okay, we are done. I did want to show you one little tip for the border. Okay, you will notice when you are done that the border kind of crunches up and you can't really see the fillets, these. So what I do is, rather than blocking, which you are welcome to do if you're experienced, you've got a blocking board or you know how to block without a board, whatever. Have at it. What I do is iron. Yes, I iron. So I ironed this little piece right here so you can see how it opens up the fillets. So you can see the stitches much nicer. So I'm going to leave a link in the description area below. I've got a video that shows you how you can iron crochet. So don't get ahead of me and just take an iron to it. You cannot do that. Okay, so watch that video. If you don't know how to get into that description area, then in the white space below the video, where it says Crazy Cool Crochet, click on Crazy Cool Crochet. That will take you to my homepage. From there, look up where it says videos. Click on that. It opens all of my videos up. So scroll down until you see the one with the iron. That's a dead giveaway right there. Okay, so that's that. I do hope that you've enjoyed this project. I thought it was a lot of fun, really. And if you did like it, I would so much appreciate your support of my channel by subscribing, of course. That's the obvious one, but when you watch the video all the way through or let it run, then that is a clue to YouTube that you like this and they will promote it more. Comment, give a thumbs up. All those little things are immensely helpful. And that's the best way that you can support my work at this time. And of course, if you want to go over to Etsy and actually purchase the patterns, I will love you forever. Thank you guys so much for watching, for your beautiful comments. I appreciate all of that. And we will see you on the next project.